We are a story, a narrative, either true or fabricated. This life we live is a tale of a bigger picture, a story written within our souls. For we live a story, whether great or little, that depicts the very nature of our author. A narrative so powerful pages cannot contain it. Yet some choose to read and to live. We should choose not to sit, but to live. We should not choose security, but live a story worth telling. For we all live stories, but not all stories worth sharing.
Welcome to Switch. My name is Jeremy McCarter, and over the next 4 weeks, we are going to become best friends. Now, let me start off by sharing a story with you. I grew up in the state of Kansas, and I went to college in Missouri. And while I was at college, I met this beautiful, intelligent, athletic girl. And she wanted nothing to do with me. So I was forced to do something that I shouldn't even show you what this is. But I was forced to do something known as the vibe. Okay? Now, you laugh. This is the elephant edition. You know, it's the trunk. Okay? And then you say, "What's up?" That's the vibe. And you laugh, but it worked. She's my best friend. We're married, and we've been married for numerous years now. Well, we decided we should start having kids. And we started to have kids. And our first kid was a son named Titus. Titus is 7 now, but when Titus was a baby, he was the easiest kid. He was funny. He was lovable. And when we would hang out with our friends, they would say, "We want a kid like Titus." He was super easy. And so Christy and I decided, hey, we were good this first time. Let's do it again. And again and again and again. You know what I'm talking about? So we decided we're going to have another kid. And 2 years later, we welcomed to this world another boy named Mac. Now, Mac is from a different world. Now, let me tell you let me explain that. Mac will put his shoes on the wrong feet. Mac will put his shirt on backwards, his pants on backwards, socks inside out. He's just all over the place kind of kid. He'll come out sometimes like this. I'm like, "What's wrong?" "My underwear don't fit." And then upon further investigation, he's got 2 legs through 1 hole, things like that really cool. So when his school announced that they were going to have Freaky Friday, this day where kids can dress up and just wear whatever they want and sort of look goofy, it should play to Mac's advantage. But on Thursday, the teacher sort of informed us that Mac had asked her a question that was a little bit weird. He said, "Can I come to school naked?" All right, now, as a parent, when your kid does something like that, you have to have a conversation with them, just in case the teacher or the principal asks. And so we had the conversation. And we said, "Mac, why would you ask if you can go to school naked on Freaky Friday?" Here's his response, no lie. "I thought it would be freaky." Good point. But once again, Mac, an easy kid, lovable kid. People pick him up, hug him all the time. So we thought, we're on a roll. We're 2 for 2. Let's roll the dice again. And then we had our third boy, Tate. And I love Tate. I really do love Tate. And so with everything I'm about to say right after this, it does not take away from the fact that I love Tate. But as you can tell from this picture, we don't even let Tate in pictures with our boys. Because Tate throws stuff. Tate throws fits. Tate screams when he doesn't get his way. Tate wants a tattoo of the devil. I mean, Tate is messed up. I am not lying. You think I'm kidding? Recently, at the gym, Tate was suspended for 12 days for biting other kids. The kid's going to jail if he doesn't find Jesus. I promise you that. But that's Tate. That's my family. That's my story. And here's the thing. You have a story too. And tonight we're going to jump into a series called Epic. And this series is all about stories. Now, let me tell you why this is such an important thing. Right now, you are living a life. And you're sort of going through it. You're making choices. Some of those choices are really big. Some of them are small. You know, do I cheat on this test? Do I take an AP class? Do I tell my parents what happened this weekend? You have a bunch of choices. And right now, it's just life. But let me tell you what I know as an adult. It's a story right now. But one day, this is going to be a story that you're going to tell. Right now, it's bigger than life. It's everything. But one day, this is going to be the story you tell other people, the people around you. I mean, it's a pretty simple concept. When I get with my friends, when I get with my family, maybe you could do this too. What are we doing with our friends and family? We tell stories, yeah. We tell stories, and I don't know about you, but when I tell stories, I'm in the story. Oh, I was driving in the car the other day, and I went here. Or I was at the mall, and I saw this. Or I was outside, and this is what was happening. I'm in the story. I like to tell stories. And where does my story come from? It comes from my life. And the person I'm talking to, they have a story, and their story comes from their life. And sometimes their story includes my story. People say things like, oh, yeah, I remember when Jeremy fell through the glass table and had to get stitches in his butt. Ha, 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 ha. That's a story. I remember people say, oh, yeah, I remember when we went streaking in college and Jeremy was in front of the pack. That was hilarious. La, ha, ha. Or people say, oh, I remember Jeremy when he locked his brother out on the roof naked. Ha, ha, ha. But you know what? We all tell stories. Now, let me just sort of tell you what I want from you when we get to the end of this series. Okay, here's our goal, our hope for you. Here's what we want for you. My hope is that when you go to tell your story, whether it's 60 minutes, 60 days, or 60 years from now, I want you to be able to tell a story that you are proud to tell. A story that you wouldn't be ashamed of. A story that when people hear it, they'd be like, wow, that's an incredible story. That's what I want for you guys. And so as we approach this series, I need you to treat tonight like a book. I actually just treat the series like a book. And the reason I say that is tonight's the introduction, and as we go along, there's going to be more to it. But you may walk away tonight, you may still have questions and be like, well, he never really said anything about this. Here's my advice to you. Come back next week. There's going to be more. So tonight we're going to kick off the series, Epic. All right, so I don't know about you guys, but I know this about me. I love stories. And that's a good thing because stories are all around us. Stories are on TV. Stories are in the movies. Stories are in books. Stories are on the internet. There are times where I will go and I will get on the internet to check a thing. I'm going to get on there to read a message or to read a post real quick. And I'll hop on and all of a sudden it's like, it's like something grabs me. Not literally, okay, because you're sixth grade, I'm not just joking. Okay, but it's like a, look at what everybody else is doing while you do nothing. And the next thing you know, that beam goes down and 2 hours of my life are gone. And I'm like, what has happened? Where did the time go? And I can tell you what everybody else in the world did except me. Well, I can tell you what I did. I sat at a computer. Has anybody else experienced, you guys got something like that? Yeah, why is that? Because we love stories. We get lost in stories. I think, I don't think I'm the only one at this, but there are times that I look at stories, and my favorite part of stories are the emotions that they pull out of me. I love to hear a story that's so funny that I laugh until I cry. I love a story or a movie that I watch, and it's so scary that night when I'm laying in bed, I'm so freaked out that if somebody were to knock on the door or if somebody were to knock on my window, I would pee the bed, literally. I love those stories where it's so intense that I can't take my eyes off the screen, or I'm in a book and I just have to keep turning the page because I have to know what's next, what's going to happen. I need to know the rest of the story. I love stories where there's a twist, and I didn't even see it coming. And when it happens, I just sit there sort of numb like, what just happened there? And I have to reread or rewind and sort of make sure I caught all the details. I love stories where there's a hero. And the hero saves the day, or the hero does what is right. Or I love it when there's a group of people who there's such a cause or such a burden for their heart that they will risk everything, including their lives, to accomplish that mission. I love those kinds of stories. I love stories where vampires and wolves come together and they look to save baby. No, I'm just kidding. I don't like those kind of. Actually, I do sort of like those stories, but that's another story. All right. But here's the thing. When I encounter those types of stories, when I see those stories, when I read those stories, it energizes me, and I think to myself, I want a story like that. I want a story that matters. I want a story that when people read it, they can't set it down. I want a story that is epic. I heard a story this week that I love the story. It was a story of this elderly man who lives in a nursing home, and every week he does something I think is incredible. He reads a story to this lady who has Alzheimer's, which means she can't remember anything. And so every day, this guy sort of sits there and he will begin to read this story. And he always reads the same sort of story. And it's this romantic story. It's a story about this girl, and she's in love with this guy. But because of a situation, they have to break up, and they're separated. And the girl goes and she finds a new guy. But then the other guy comes back into the picture. And she has to choose. Who am I going to choose now? Who's the guy for me? As I'm listening to the story, I'm thinking, this is an incredible story. And this guy, like I said, I love the fact that every day he's reading the story, and then all of a sudden one day, recently, the story clicked for her. This was her story that he was reading. You see, when this girl, whose name in the story is Allie, when she got sick, when she figured out that she had, some of you just figured out, this is the Notebook. When she figured out that she had Alzheimer's, when she had the illness, she decided she was going to write out her story. And she put it into a notebook. And what did the notebook say? What the notebook said, read this and I'll come back to you. So what did that guy do? What did her husband do every single day? He read her story. He told her story. And here's my question for you. What kind of story do you want to tell? What kind of story do you want to have? And here's why this is important. Every day that you live, every choice that you make, it is a paragraph in the story of your life. And it's a story that somebody is going to read. It's a story that you're going to one day tell. It's the story you're going to tell your friends, the story you may tell your parents. It's the story for those of you who decide you want to get married. It's the story you're going to tell your future husband or your future wife. And what it may be a story, if you have kids, it'll be the story you tell your kids. What kind of story do you want to tell? Live this life. Live this life the way you want to tell it. Live this life the way you want to tell it. So, there's a kid at school who was getting picked on. And I saw it. And I thought, man, somebody needs to stick up for that kid. But I'm not going to do anything about it. I don't want to get beat up. That's a story. I saw a kid at school who was getting picked on, and somebody needed to stick up for him. And I stuck up for him. That's a story. My relationship with my parents, it went south. It went bad. And I just couldn't handle them anymore. So I just shut down. I just quit talking to them. That's a story. Or, man, my relationship with my parents, it went south. It got messed up. So I apologized, and I started to try to fix it with them. That's a story. Or, hey, my friend, they posted something stupid about me on the internet. And I'm mad. So you know what I'm going to do? I posted something bad about them. That's a story. Oh, somebody posted something bad about me on Facebook, and I was mad, but I just sort of said, God, here it is. I'm not going to post anything back. That's a story. What kind of story do you want to tell? Once again, this is a story that other people are going to tell about you. What story you want? What story you want to be for you? How do you want to be remembered? And I think that example, just knowing that people have a story they're going to tell about me, really forcing me back to a story that I love in the Bible. If you have a Bible, if you have a phone that can connect to the internet, jump on it right now. We're going to go to uversion.com. If you don't have something like that, it's going to be here on the screen with me. But I want to look at a story about a guy who has a different kind of story. And actually, if you don't know anything about Jesus, is actually going to tell the story. And the story is called the story of the Good Samaritan. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Jesus before we get into the story. Jesus did a lot of incredible things when he was here on this earth. And one of the things that I love the most is Jesus told incredible stories. And the story we're about to look at, we're going to start in verse 30. But before we do that, let me just sort of set the story up. When Jesus was on earth, lots of people were intrigued by Jesus. They wanted to be around Jesus. They wanted to see Jesus do miracles. They wanted to hear Jesus tell stories. But there was a group of people who didn't like Jesus. And ironically enough, it was the religious people, the people who you would think that they would be Jesus' biggest fans. And so they would come and they would try to get Jesus in front of big crowds and they would ask him tough questions because they were trying to get Jesus to make a bad answer. They were trying to have Jesus discredit themselves. They wanted to mess up his story. And so in the story we're about to jump into, that's what's happening. An expert in law, in the religious law, has Jesus in front of a crowd of people. And he says, hey, Jesus, I have a question for you. And the question basically boils down to, who is my neighbor? But I just want us to check out the story. So here we go. If you have your Bible, starting in verse 30. It says, Jesus replied with a story. He said this: a Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, which is about 17 miles. And he was attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him up, and left him half dead beside the road. Now, Jesus is making up this story to teach a point. This isn't real. He's trying to sort of tell a story because he wants him to connect to what he's saying. Now, what is the point of the story? We don't know yet. Typically, Jesus wouldn't tell you the point of the story until he got to the end. And sometimes, even when he got to the end, he wouldn't tell you the point. He would just walk off. So in the story, you have this in the story, you have this guy who's been beat up and he's laying on the road right here, left for dead. And it says, the story goes on, by chance, a priest came along. But when he saw the man lying there, he crossed to the other side of the road and passed him by. So now everybody who's listening to Jesus talk is like, wait. The priest just walked by the guy? What happened? Why did he just walk by? We don't know. Jesus sort of just goes on with the story. Now, there's some things we can assume. I can assume at some point in the story, from when he saw the guy to when he walked by the guy, that priest convinced himself that he didn't need to stop. Maybe he was too busy. Maybe he was afraid of what could happen. Or maybe he just didn't care. But for some reason, he just walks by. And so the story picks back up. It says, and then a temple assistant walked over. Now, a temple assistant, it's not a priest, it's not a religious person, but it's a respected person in the culture that they live in. So a temple assistant walked over and looked at him lying there. But he also passed by on the other side. So once again, people are like, wait, why didn't he stop? We don't know. It's a story. We don't know why he's not stopping. He saw a guy who needed help, and for some reason, he convinced himself that he wasn't the one who needed to help him, and he just walks on by. Jesus keeps talking. Then a despised Samaritan. Now, the people of the Jewish culture hated Samaritans. There was this big racial tension, this big racial issue. And so Jews would not go into the Samaritan hood, and the Samaritans would not go into the Jews' hood, because if they did, it would bring out like gang fights, mafia, all kinds of things. There would be drive-bys, there would be kidnappings of girlfriends, there would be graffiti, there would be all these drastic things that they didn't want to have, so they would just stay out of each other's territory, but they hated each other. And in this story, when Jesus is telling it, he chooses this guy, the despised Samaritan, and listen to what the despised Samaritan did. It says, then a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man, he felt compassion before him. Translation, he saw what needed to be done and he felt appropriately. Something inside of him said, hey, something needs to be done. So going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. Then he put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn where he took care of him. And the next day he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins. He stayed the night. He gave him 2 silver coins telling him, hey, take care of this man, and if his bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time I'm here. And the story ends. End of the story. Wait, Jesus, what's the point? And that's when Jesus looked at the religious person. That's when he looked at the expert in the religious law, and he said, and he asked this question. Now, which of these 3 bandits would you say was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by bandits? And what Jesus was asking was pretty simple. Which of these guys did the right thing? Which of these guys did the thing that you would want somebody to do for you if you were in that situation? Which one of these guys would you brag about to your friends and family? Which one of these guys told a good story? To which the expert in religious law said this: the one who showed him mercy. Then Jesus said, yes, now go and do the same. Do you want to live a good story? Do you want to live a story that you can be proud of? Do you want a story that your family can be proud of, your parents can be proud of, that you'll be proud to tell your future spouse, that you'll be proud to tell your kids? When you see a need, meet it. When you know what needs to be done, do it. When you have to choose between right or wrong, choose to do what is right. Go and do the same. Live this life the way you want to tell it. And even though this is just a story, if we were to jump into the story and we were to go find this guy who was basically left to die, and we were to say, hey, whose story impacted your story the most? Hey, whose story touched your story? Whose story changed your life? It wouldn't be the priest. It wouldn't be the temple assistant. It would be the Samaritan. Do you want your story to be good? Do you want to tell a story that matters? Do you want a story that you can be proud of? Do you want to tell a story that's not just good, but it's epic? Go and do the same. As we wrap up, here's my one thing I wonder. I wonder what would happen. I wonder what would happen if the students who make up Switch and students who watch this all across the world via the internet, I wonder what would happen if we would make a decision for 24 hours to live a good story, to live this life the way we want to tell it. What would happen? What would be different on your car ride home tonight? What would be different when you got home and interacted with your family? What would happen at school tomorrow? What would you do at your school tomorrow that you've never done before? Remember, what if we all did this collectively? Every one of us did this for 24 hours. Some of you may say, oh, I'm going to do it for 7 days, whatever. But for 24 hours, if all of us did it, what would happen? What can we do in our schools? What can we do in our community? What can we do in our cities? What can we do in our country? I don't know. But I can tell you this. If every one of us were to just for 24 hours to live this life the way we want to tell it, we would have an epic story. You would have a story that you could tell. And you would have a story that you could be proud of. But will you do it? Will you be brave enough for the next 24 hours to say, I'm going to live the story the way I want to tell it. I'm going to live an epic story. Let's go ahead and bow our heads, close our eyes. This is sort of the point of the message where we sort of start to do business with God. You see, for some of you right now, this isn't about, 24 hours. Some of you got some jacked up stories. And you don't need this challenge. You need a new start. You need a new paragraph. You need a new chapter. Some of you are thinking, I need a new book. But I just want to read you some words that a guy named Paul said. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Paul's story. Paul was a person who used to kill Christians. And then all of a sudden, Jesus said, hey, I want to use you. Listen to the words Paul says. It says, brothers, I don't consider myself yet to have taken hold of it. I haven't got this all figured out. But one thing I do, I forget what is behind me, and I strain towards what is ahead. For those of you, if you're here tonight and your story's messed up and you know your story's messed up, listen to what Paul's saying. Hey, forget about what's behind you and strain for what is ahead. Hey, stop what you're doing. If your story's a bad story, stop that story. If you're in a relationship that's not good, get out. If you're in a story where you're making bad choices at school, quit making bad choices. If you've got the wrong friends, get some new friends. Stop hanging with that group. And turn your story around. Start a new chapter. Start a new page. How many of you tonight would be honest and say, Jeremy, I'm not sure I'm living a life that's worth telling? How many of you would be honest enough to say, hey, that's me? Just raise your hand real quick. I'm not going to embarrass you. Nobody looking around. Man, thank you guys. Man, I'm proud of you guys. Bold, proud of you for raising your hand. Let me pray for you real quick. God, for every student who just raised their hand, for those who were scared to raise their hand even in this moment. God, we come, we say, we want our stories to be stories that matter. We want our stories to be good stories. We want our stories to be epic stories. And God, we come asking you to sort of change our hearts. God, some of us are in situations that we need to get out of. God, help us to get out of those situations. Surround us with people who can walk us through those things. Continuing in prayer, there's another group of you. And your story looks a little bit different too, because you're not in need of a new story. You're sort of like the person who was laying dead on the road. You need somebody to save you. You need a hero. And I want to tell you another story. I want to tell you a story about Jesus. And this story is, Jesus came to this earth because something happened. You see, God created us to have a relationship with Him. But we messed up. We sinned. We did something that didn't line up with what God wanted us to do. And because of that, we got separated from God. And God said, no, I want those people back. What am I going to do? And God had a story. God had a plan. And it's the story of the Bible. And so He sends His Son, Jesus, to this earth to live a perfect life. And Jesus told stories like I told you tonight. And Jesus did miracles like we talked about. And Jesus did all these incredible things. But the one thing I didn't mention is Jesus, at the end of His life, He was beaten. He was spit on. He was mocked. And He died on a cross. And it wasn't because of something He did. It was something we did. But it was His way of saying, hey, God wants a way to connect with you, and I'm going to provide that way. And so Jesus died on a cross so we can have a relationship with God. And for some of you tonight, this is your time to connect to your Father. This is time for you to connect to the bigger story. This is for time for you to sort of set down your story, your little puny story, and say, all right, God, the story I have, I want it to be your story. And here in a second, I'm going to ask for those of you who have not made a decision to make Christ part of your life and say, I want my life in your hands. Tonight, I'm going to ask you to make that decision, to make the biggest decision of your story. Will you do it? You going to be brave enough? Man, don't let the enemy tell you, oh, you don't need that. You need this. This is your moment, and we're going to go there right now. If you're here tonight and you're saying, I'm giving my story to God. I want God to have my story. I want to be in His story. Raise your hand right now. All over this room, if that's you, see your hand. Man, look up here at me when you raise your hand. Man, see you right there. But man, I'm proud of you. Right there, bro. Fantastic. Hey, this group right here, great decision. Fantastic. Anybody else? Hey, that's me over here. I see you guys. Man, awesome decision. This will be the story. This will change your story. Anybody else say, hey, man, don't forget me. I want included in this. Man, back then, man, proud of you guys. I love when guys raise their hands. Spiritual leaders, thank you, thank you, thank you. Welcome to the family of God. All you raise your hand. Anybody else? We're going to pray here in a second. Anybody else say, hey, don't forget me in this prayer. I want in. Cool, got you, buddy. All right, we're going to pray. And as we pray, we're going to pray as a family. We're not going to do this alone. So as I pray, repeat after me. Dear God, thank you for sending your son to die for me. I thank you for his story. I thank you that you forgive me of my story. I give you my life. I give you my story, and I ask you to show me how to live this life. Change me. Make me new. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Give it up for those who just made the best decision of their life.